Hi everyone. Dahi, I miss you, son. I love you, and I am so happy that you're doing better. Hopefully, you can finally come home in a couple of months. Um, I know it's been a while since I've done a video, so I figured we'd go back and go over some more folklore and stuff that comes from Laos and Siam. So, the Siam is a country that is currently known as Thailand. Um, Over 1,000 years ago, easily like the 16th century, give or take, maybe even earlier, the area that we now call Thailand was known as Siam. It, the Kingdom of Siam actually expanded all the way into modern day Laos, Cambodia, and parts of Myanmar, if I remember correctly. Anyways, so it wasn't until 1927 or 1932 when it started being known as Thailand. Now, the reason for the name primarily was the majority of the people there referred to themselves as Thai or Tai. So, of course, it eventually became known as Thailandia, which came into Thailand. And yeah, so that's how we got Thailand. But the stories I'm going to read today come from the northern part of Siam, or modern Thailand, sometimes also referred to as Asan. So in Asan, they don't quite speak Thai like the rest of it. Instead, they have a strong influence from Laos because during that time frame, the kingdom of Lansang and Siam or Ayutthaya would fight over territory quite often, eventually leading to the kingdom breaking apart. Now, I was told when I was younger that all of it used to be a single kingdom, and then after one of the great kings died, he left the two parts split up between his sons so that they can both rule, and thus creating the separate kingdoms. And it's also why um, Laotian and Thai language are very similar. Now, the first story we're going to read is an interesting one about the child of the woods. So, deep in the forest of the north, there is a large village of jungle people, and among them is one old woman who is held in reverence by all. The stranger who asks why she is honored as a princess is thus answered by her: "Verily, I have much boon." Boon in this case means merit or spiritual merit or karma. So, "I have much boon, for I am but a child of nature. When I was a young maiden, it fell upon a day that my heart grew hot with anger. For many days the anger grew until it filled my whole heart. Also were my eyes so red that I could see but dimly, and no longer could I live in the village or among my own people. For I hated all men, and I felt that the beasts of the forest were more to me than my kindred. Therefore I fled from the face of man into the jungle where no human foot had ever gone. All day I journeyed, running as though my feet would never weary, and feeling no pangs of hunger. When the darkness closed about me, I was not afraid, but I lay down under the shelter of a tree, and for a time slept peacefully as though in my own home. At length I was awakened by the breath of an animal, and in the clear light of the moon I saw a large tiger before me. It smelled of my face, my hands, and my feet, and then seated itself by my head and watched me through the night, and I lay there unafraid. In the early morning The tiger departed, and I continued my journey. Quieter was my heart. Still, I disliked my own people, but had no fear of the beasts or the reptiles of the forest. During the day, I ate of the fruit which grew wild in abundance, and at night I slept neath the tree, protected and guarded by fierce wild beasts which molested not my sleep. In this case, molested is referring to being disturbed or aggravated. Oftentimes, in older stories, the word molested simply means to be messed with. So, for many days I wandered thus, and the night was secure, for the wild beast watched over and protected me. And thus my heart grew cool in my bosom, and I no longer hated my people. And after one moon had gone, I found myself near a village. The people wandered to see me approach from the jungle, dreaded as being the jungle of the man-eating tiger. When I related my story, the people were filled with wonder and brought rich gifts for me. For a year and a day I abode there, and no more the wild beasts molested their cattle. But my heart yearned to see the face of my kindred again. So laden with silver, gold, and rich garments, and seated in the howdah of an elephant, the people escorted me to my own village, and here have I abode in the content these 100 years. So, sounds like this young girl was obviously frustrated and tired of being picked on, and so she ran away into the woods. Her anger took her there. However, even though she was angry and everything, she still collected a lot of good karma. Thus, she had strong boon, or a lot of good merits. Her connection and spiritual merits. Demon cat behind me. So, her merits, more or less, is what allowed her to connect with the animals. That spiritual connection led them to understand she was a good person and thus watched over her. Sort of reminds me of the Jungle Book story almost. But after a while of running around, living in the woods, her anger finally calmed down, and while wandering she came across this village who, seeing her as a wise person, they treated her accordingly, gave her lots of riches, and eventually helped her return to her home. It says that she was seated in a howdah. Now the howdah are big giant cars, or when I say car, more or less it's a big giant box that's placed on the back of an elephant that allows them to travel very comfortably. The next story we're going to read is about a mystical place that is believed to be hidden in the mountains and protected and guarded by the spirits. Alright. So, the hunters who are continually going about from place to place, climbing up high hills, descending into deep ravines, and making ways through the jungles in search of the wild bison and other game, tell strange tales of an enchanted place away on the top of a lofty mountain. There is a beautiful lake, which is bright and clear as a drop of morning dew hanging on the petal of a white water lily, and when you drink of it, you are no longer weary. New life has come into you, and your body is more vigorous than ever before. The flowers on the margin of this enchanted lake are more beautiful than those that grow in any other spot, and such is the love of the cherishing spirits for it, that they care for it as for no other place in this world. Bananas of larger growth that can be found in the gardens of man, and oranges sweeter to the taste than those we ever eat. The fruits of all trees are more beautiful to the eye and richer than man can produce are there free to can produce. So the fruits are there free to those who can find them. All the fowls usually nurtured by man and flocking about his doors are there, and they are not affrighted by the presence of the hunter, but come at his call. Should the hunter wish to kill them, his arrow cannot pierce their charmed bodies to deprive them of life, but the arrow falls harmless to the ground, because the spirits protect them and their lives are sacred. Great fields of rice are about this place, and the hunter marvels at the size of the grains and at the strength of the stalks. No field cared for by man has seen grain like that which the spirits nourish. Many men, on hearing of this wonderful mountain top, have sought it, but all have returned unsuccessful to their homes, saying no such place is on this earth. Only the hunter, who has chased the game through the jungle, over the streams, and up the steep mountainside, when tired and discouraged because the coveted prize has gone far beyond his reach, is rewarded for all of his labor, when he finds himself in the garden of fruit, or on the margin of the enchanted lake, whose water gives renewed vigor to his wearied body. Often, when the hunter desires to eat of the flesh of the fowl, he endeavors to kill this fowl, but no effort of his can take their life, as the spirits hold them in their care. No mortal can harm them, nor can the hunter take any of the fruit away, for as he leaves the spot, no matter how he may hold it, it vanishes from his hand. And thus, no man who has not seen the place has eaten of the fruit, nor drank of the water. So many doubt their existence. For such is the heart of man, that he must touch with his hands, see with his eyes, or taste with his tongue, afore he can believe. Nevertheless, on the top of the lofty mountains there is a lake with the cool waters, clear and beautiful, where the fowl swim on its surface, or drink from its margin, and the grain and the fruit ripen for those who are loved of the Spirit, and are led by them to this cherished spot where they may rest and be refreshed, and then return to their wives and children, and tell them of the care of the spirits. The little ones, who have hearts free from guile, believe. So, in summary, that story talks about a magical glen where lost hunters can are sometimes able to find their way, led by the spirits. Now, this area is enchanted and protected by the spirits. They cultivate the fruit, they cultivate the rice, they maintain the water. The water itself isn't quite the elixir of life. However, it is strong enough that it can make someone who is wearied or injured be healed. There's a couple of stories I've heard about it. Now, whether you believe or not, it's up to you. However, the folklore itself states more or less that most people can't find it because they can only believe after they see it. So sometimes you need to believe it before you're allowed to see it. I find that a common theme in a lot of folklore or stuff to do with the spiritual world. This last, I think we'll cover two more short tales. The Spirit Guarded Cave. I remember this one. It's actually pretty good. So, when the people of the far north, which is referring to China, when people of the far north were molested by their foes and were in continual fear, they consulted together, saying, "Our lives are spent in trying to escape from our enemies, and no joy can be ours. Let us flee to the south country, where, if the people make slaves of us, we can at least know that our lives will be spared, and life, even in slavery, is better than this constant fear of our enemies destroying both ourselves and our dwelling places, and taking our cattle for their own. Now, the country to the south that they're referring to is Siam. Now, they gathered together all of their household goods, secreted their money and jewels about their persons, and loading their cattle with rice. They commenced their toilsome journey through the narrow jungle paths and across a high mountain on their way to the south, where they hoped for peace and safety. The way was long and difficult, and the rice was all eaten and the cattle killed and consumed before they had nearly reached their journey's end. And then the fugitives commenced to use their money to buy food that they may have strength for the journey, and they whispered one to another that the people looked with covetous eyes on their hoard of money and jewels, and they feared they would be slain because of the greed of the people. One man, wiser than the others, said, "Why do we endanger our lives for our possessions? Can we not find some secret place in which to leave our money and jewels, and when brighter days come to us, we can return and find them even as we left them?" All of the people cried, "Your words are wise. Let us do accordingly." And thus, as these people were loved of the spirits, they were led to a deep cave in the midst of a wood where men seldom came, and there they left their possessions in the care of the spirits, who promised to guard them until in the days when life being brighter and more secure, the owners would come and claim them. The people journeyed on to the south country, and there lived as slaves. Many generations of them lived and died, but they could not escape, nor come to claim the vast wealth of jewels which they had left in care of the spirits of the cave. The story became known, and the inhabitants of all surrounding countries went to the cave and sought to secure the treasure. But such was the care of the spirits that no man with safety could enter the cave. A light was instantly extinguished if let down into the deep pit leading into the chambers where the treasure was, for the spirits blew their breath upon it, and it was no more. All devices were tried to obtain the treasure, and from all parts of the country the people came to try to overcome the charm which the spirits had placed upon the cave, but no one was able to break it. One man went even into the treasure chamber and filled his hands with the precious stones, but he was overcome by a deadly sickness, and was forced to replace the jewels in the treasure chest and flee for his life, so as to escape the wrath of the guarding spirits. Even the white foreign strangers who have come into the land and placed their strong hands on the elephants and the trees of the forest and claimed them for their use, were baffled and driven back by the faithful spirits when they endeavored to enter the treasure chamber. And for all times this treasure shall remain there. For if the white foreigner by his wisdom or by his craft fails to obtain it, verily it will remain untouched forever. Now this story is pretty straightforward. People trying to escape China from being abused, chased, and killed took everything they owned with the hopes of using it to help them during their journey. But, of course, the greed of man often leads to folly. So they hid the stuff in a cave, and a guardian spirit was placed over it. Now, it's historically known that after the colonists came and the foreigners, they heard this story of hidden treasure, they decided to go out to seek it. Now, remember that at this time, there was very little use of modern technology for its time. And of course, the French and the Europeans were very strong with their technology. Everything from rifles, gunpowder, military strength, their application of warfare was vastly different than what they were used to. And so, at times, these foreigners seemed to have strength beyond anything they could imagine. Because of that, they felt that if even these foreigners with their strange and advanced technology couldn't retrieve it, then it'll be lost forever. Stories like these have often led to many a treasure hunts and many a people getting lost or just wasting their time unable to find the treasure. But it does make you wonder about it. Now, this last one that we'll read is about the mountain spirits. So, the spirits who lived in the mountains near a large city upon a time wanted money for some purpose, and they brought down to the people of the city a number of large and heavy stone mortars, which they commanded them to buy at an exorbitant price. The men of the city said, "The price you ask is too great. Moreover, we have no need for your mortar, as they are too large for us to use in pounding out our rice, or for any other purpose. Therefore, we do not wish to buy them." The spirits were very angry because they did not cheerfully agree to pay the money, and answered, "If you will not buy these mortars, which we have brought for your use, you shall carry them to our home on the top of the mountain, for the labor of bringing them down has wearied us." Not daring to incur the wrath of the spirits, and yet being utterly unable to carry the huge mortars to the high mountains, they paid the price, for they reasoned, "Is any price too great to risk our falling under the displeasure of evil spirits?" The spirits departed with the money, and to this day the stone mortars are scattered about the streets of that city, and when strangers ask why they are there, and what use is made of them, this story will be told, and all people say, "It is verily the truth, for do you not see them with your eyes? And how else could they have come here, and had not the spirits brought them?" That's an interesting one, and I haven't heard that one before. But it makes me think about the Plain of Jars in Laos. The Plain of Jars is kind of exactly what it sounds. In a large plain, there are these giant stone jars that people, historians, archaeologists, no one is 100% sure as for their use or how they came about. For a while, it was believed that they were used as burial tombs. Others, there are stories and legends about gi- giants in Southeast Asia, that both mountain and plain giants, and that they are the reason behind the stone jars, that they would use them for cooking and everything else. So, whether you believe in these folklore or legends, it's up to you. But either way, I hope you found them enjoyable. Hopefully, I'll be able to record some more in the near future. Son, I love you, and hopefully you can come home. It's been over a year now. As for everyone else who's watching this, thank you, and I hope you enjoyed it. Love you, son.